Okay, talking today with artist Louise Burdett. Hello, Louise.
Hello, Mark.
Nice to see you.
It's very nice to be here.
Good. Weather's a bit off. Summer.
It's tragic.
Tragic.
Pembrokeshire.
Pembrokeshire weather. Love it. So, when did you first fall in love with the idea of becoming an artist?
I think probably about the age of 16. And so at school, I was sort of ushered into a life drawing class when I was still doing my O-levels. I was the last year of O-levels. That tells you how old I am. In 1987, 6, something like that. And I was invited into the life drawing class, which is sixth form only, because I showed some sort of skill. And at that point, I remember sitting there thinking, oh, this feels really good. I'm a bit nervous. Oh, it's a naked man. And all those sorts of feelings, but just really feeling at home in terms of the drawing and it being part of me. And I suppose that was uncovered. I would say an element of talent was uncovered at, I think I was 10.
Wow.
And
okay.
I drew a picture of Robert Louis Stevenson.
Wow.
And
very
it was
specific.
I remember it distinctly. And I'd asked, there was a boy in my class called Stephen Ebden who used to draw these very stiff but sort of very muscly kind of superhero type figures. And I remember thinking, how do you do that? I don't understand how you do that. And he just said, well, you just sort of sketch a bit, and that just literally flicked a switch in my head. Okay. And then suddenly I was able to draw rather than in that sort of quite bird's eye sort of 2D sort of fashion. I was able to draw differently. It was really strange.
So you almost suddenly found a freedom.
Yes, it's literally a switch.
Yeah.
Literally, now I see how you do that, and I was just able to draw. I'm sure I'd look back at that picture of Robert Louis Stevenson and think, oh, okay, well, it's not quite what I remembered, but it was certainly the beginning of, and I'm air quotes, good at art.
Good at art. Okay. I noticed from your CV that you spent quite a few years not in the art world.
That's correct.
So what did you do during that period?
Okay.
Because if you'd found you were good at art, what made you move away from it?
Well, okay, so whilst being good at art, I think I was pushed towards it because I was demonstrably good at something. And so I went through sixth form, loved it, I was obsessed with it. That was where I spent all my time in the art rooms, would have just done nothing else if I could. Then, went to foundation and did a degree, and it was what I thought I should do. And I remember having quite a rude awakening went to Coventry University it was Poly at the time, to do my degree, and having quite a rude awakening because I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I didn't understand what the art world was. I just thought it was about being, good, and I used to love all the Renaissance paintings, and I very much loved beauty in art and things like that. And I got there, and it was like, well, what do you think? And I was like, what? Think? I don't know. What is? All of the darlings of the art world at that time was all the YBAs, the Damien Hirst and the Rachel Whitereads, and I was like, I have no idea what that is. And I was abandoned, I would say, by the tutors because I didn't have anything to say. I was really immature. My way of dealing with it was to sort of hide a bit. And I did come away. I did find a tutor at the end of the second year, and I sort of flitted from sculpture to painting. And it very much depends sometimes when you're at art college who is there and who the relationships you form with the tutors as to what you end up doing. So, for instance, in the first year, I will come on to answering the point you made. But so in the first year, I started stone carving, and there was a tutor there called Tim Threlfall. And he sort of took me under my wing, and I was like, oh, I'm going to be a stone carver. And then I came back for the second year, and he'd left. Don't know what happened to him, don't know where he went. and then I was like left, remember, for this feeling of just not knowing, you know, what to do, where to go. The lack of guidance, obviously, I was depending on, it was gone. So I went back to my failsafe, which was painting. And it was a big move to move from downstairs in sculpture to upstairs in painting. It was a lot of, you know, frowning and, oh, you're not a real painter, you've come from sculpture. You know, it was ridiculous. But anyway, and then started painting sort of figurative stuff, very emotional, sort of personal stuff. And then sort of just about managed to sort of squeeze my way through and managed just about to get, I think I got a Desmond, a tutu. A tutu. So I was already sort of a bit on the back foot, and then I did some teaching residencies in schools, and that was really, really good. But really by that time, I still didn't really know who I was as an artist and what I was doing, and the lack of security I found very, very difficult. All the residencies I was doing was short term. You know, I had a bit of a difficult time with one where they offered me somewhere to live on site, and then halfway through they said, sorry, we need that for a teacher. You've got to go. And there's a sense of insecurity, and I was like, you know what, I need something else to give, because I'm an adult, you know, I'm not going home. I need to be able to earn money. And so I did an office skills training course and suddenly found myself temping, and I loved it.
Oh, okay.
Because
Slight radical change of direction.
Well, but so I'd gone from, I had this love affair with art. It was a bit of a, you know, there was a bit of a sting in the tail. I got a bit, my fingers burnt, and suddenly I had structure. I had a wage. I had structure. People, I knew what I was supposed to be doing, and I don't think I knew what I was supposed to be doing before. So then I was lucky enough to end up temping, and this was all in London, which was fun. And I ended up temping at BBC Worldwide, and stayed there for 4 or 5 years. Ended up doing trade events, organising and things like that. And actually it was an absolute blast. Had a wonderful time, you know, and sort of went on to a series of other jobs. Some of them I hated, some of them I liked, until 2013 I took a career break because I had 2 small children. My husband's job was taking him everywhere, and I was made redundant from a job, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to accept this, take a few years off, be with the kids while they're small, and that was it really. And that sort of allowed me, I think it took 3 years for me then to start painting again, because I'd obviously always had an unfinished business, but this was nearly 20 years later, so obviously I'd grown up a lot in that time.
Okay, so when you went back to the art world, was there an impact on your artwork from working outside of the art world for a period of time? Or a long period of time? Yeah,
it was a long period actually. I mean, say nearly 20 years. And it's not, some of it is like riding a bike and some of it isn't. So my hand-eye coordination completely went. I had no appreciation of how good it was when I was still painting. But really, I think the biggest difference is I'd grown in confidence. I knew more about who I was as a person. I understand how to get things done. You know, I'd done marketing things. I put on loads of events. You know, I was more than just the artist. I was even though I wouldn't say I'm good at running a business particularly, but I could do all the elements of it. So, and as we know, you know, art is work. Art's hard work. It's not, even if you are the most talented person in the world, that is not going to, you know, put a roof over your head. You need to work at what you're doing. And suppose what I came back to it with was more of a sense of what's the word I'm looking for? Empowerment.
Okay.
And a broader range of skills, and also a lot of teaching skills. So I had another another string to add to my bow.
So did you feel when you went back to art that you'd actually found what you wanted to say as an artist, or did that develop over time?
Art's a bit of a therapy for me. So I do suffer from a bit of anxiety, and I've had, you know, a little bit of anxiety and depression, and I live with someone who has a lot of anxiety and depression, and that art definitely for me is a way of
Expressing.
or of coping.
Okay.
And so I would say that I had an itch that needed to be scratched. I knew I had unfinished business, but I had, as I've said, my skills were not there. So during that period of time, when people would say, "What do you do?" I'd say, "Well, I'm working here or working there." But I'd always say, and you could see in people's eyes, they didn't believe me. I'd always say, "Well, but really, deep down inside, I'm an artist." And they'd be like, "Of course you are." Yeah. "So what are you doing now?" "Oh, you're working there." Or I say, "No, but I'm not doing it, but I think about it all the time." And that is true. And actually, you can look around you and see something and interpret it in your own mind from an artistic perspective. You can look at colour, etc. So there was definite development of the way I was thinking. And then also around the same time, or maybe it was 2015, so 2 years after I finished my last job, we moved out into the countryside, which was great. We were still in Kent, and I started using Instagram. And Instagram was one of the biggest drivers of me getting back into art, because it allowed me to create mini artworks very quickly and on the hoof. Mm. And being inspired by the countryside and woodland, especially this woodland. And we just got a dog, my first dog, so I was always out and I love being in the woods. I love woodland now. It's my favourite place to be. And so I'd be creating these sort of mini artworks all the time. You've got kids, And also, crossing that boundary back into art is a big thing. Mm. So I'm not a great sketchbook keeper. I did when I was at school, all the way through probably to about 1995. And then my sketchbook keeping was pretty patchy, and I still don't do it. I'm terror. I feel like it's something I should do, but then I'm thinking, should I? Should I be keeping a sketchbook? It's what I tell my students, keep a sketchbook every day, do something every day. But anyway, so to me, my Instagram account was my sketchbook at that time.
Okay. When you were walking through the woodlands, you didn't sketch. Did you bring your pictures back in your head from what you'd seen, or did you just get inspired by being outside and then come back and create?
So the role that Instagram played was allowing me to, with filters, change. So I take a photograph. The photograph would never look like how I felt. It would never capture the essence. And so I used the filters to try to change the image to reflect how I felt.
Okay.
And then those pictures were the basis of my first painting. So 2016, in this house where we were in the countryside, there was a very solid kind of shed, and it actually had like wooden planks on the roof as opposed to just a bit of chipboard, and I converted it into my sort of a studio. It was just about tall enough to get my easel in and things like that. My friend was working at an art sort of society. They sold a lot of materials, and she helped me get my sort of first lot of materials that I needed again, and that was it. That was it. So the combination of being out in the countryside, creating these mini artworks, and having the time, I began doing that, and some of it did come straight back, and some of it didn't. But what it did do is just give me a space, because I've never been able to create art if I don't have a space. Yeah. And some people can do it anywhere. They could just sit anywhere and be creating all the time. I need my own space. So just that shed at the end of the garden was a real facilitator, driver. I'm not sure what you call it.
Okay. We sort of touched a little bit on colours, because use of colours with you is quite fascinating. You said you used to take photographs, but they weren't, even though a photograph is a snapshot of what you see at the time, you didn't necessarily see that, so you altered colours. Is that right? Have I got that correct?
I altered the colours of the photograph, not of nature, because we all perceive colour differently, and we all perceive our surroundings differently, and there's a sort of a sensory, multi-sensory thing going on, isn't that feeds your brain as to what you think you're looking at. So but what Instagram helped me do is see colour. So I see my artistic career or myself as an artist as version 1 and version 2. Version 1 up to about 96, and then version 2 from 2016. And version 2 saw colour in a way that version 1 just didn't. So, for instance, one of the reasons I never painted or was interested in landscape, any type of landscape back then, was that I found it really dull. I just didn't see it. I couldn't see, my brain couldn't see into it to see the good stuff. Whereas now, and obviously this is a wonderful thing, one of the great things about living in Pembrokeshire is I see colours in landscape like a painting.
Okay.
And that part of what helped that process of that switch in my brain was using Instagram.
So I'm taken back to what you said about being in art school with people asking you, what do you think this means? What does this painting mean to you, or whatever? When you were saying you felt like you were out of your depth with answering that, so the theory of the artwork was gone. But you look at your artwork now, and there's so much you can interpret from it. So if there's always a conversation, I think, to be had around the pictures that you create. And I don't think you need to necessarily be an expert to talk about it. I just think you need to have an emotional attachment to what the pictures are trying to say. Do you think that's true? Do you think that's right? Because I think there's your recent exhibition. It had so much. It said so much to me on so many different levels. That's not something you do intentionally, I assume. This is just something you're trying to tell your own story, maybe through the art, and let other people get an emotional feel from it. Or is I've gone all rambly.
No. I think I understand what you mean. Yes, and it's like that idea of trying to tell as authentically as I can my story. Yeah. I suppose, because actually that will logically mean that not everyone, some other people will be able to identify with that as well, because we're all humans. So, it starts as being about how I feel, but there is something I've realised quite recently, just through having to talk about the recent Wounded exhibition, is that if you notice, all the figures in the exhibition are quite ambiguous. Now I wasn't conscious of that. Something else told I don't know who it was, if it was a bit of AI or it was something that talked about the ambiguity of the figures, and I was like, oh, that's true. Actually, they're all really ambiguous. They're deliberately sort of vague. They're not like worked up to a really high finish or anything like, and that in itself leaves interpretation. So the where this is most sort of pertinent, I suppose, is in the floating. So floating as a piece got by far the most response from people. It's the only painting that somebody messaged me about or mentioned on social media, whatever, and that's fine, great. I mean, there's one piece that everyone loved, fantastic. It's all you can ask for, really, isn't it? Even though there's like 30 pieces in the exhibition, but that's great. But it so floating has, so I'll just describe it. So it's a large painting. It's about 2 meters tall, 1.3 meters wide. It's a scene it's very blue. It's got a floating figure. Well, it's called floating. There's a figure in the water at the top, and it sort of gets darker as it goes down, so you're looking from underneath. So the question is, how do you see that? So lots of different people that I've spoken to see it completely differently. One person looked at it and went, oh, I can't look at that, and that person I know is quite an anxious person, and they saw that person drowning or sinking. Another person said, oh no, they're floating up, it's like really happy. That person is ridiculously chilled and really optimistic. So basically the question is, are they floating, sinking or drowning? That wasn't what it was about to start with, but actually that seems to be the impact. And I suppose the appeal to me in creating that work was this sort of sense of, I don't know if it's a sense of helplessness, or that's that idea that your destiny isn't your own. You know, you're sort of there, could go one way or the other.
Talk about ambiguity of the figures in the pictures, but there's also an ambiguity of their placement in the pictures. So does that bring you back to the concept of identity and control? You have no control about your place in the environment or society. You were your own personal identity. Is that the sort of concept?
There are lots of that, yes. So just going back to, I mentioned version 1, that my main degree showpiece, which is my most sort of successful painting, I'm still proud of it. It's 18 foot long. It's clearly about identity. The whole thing was about, who am I? Just had no idea. When I was a child, I thought I was adopted because I didn't look like anyone in my family, and then I realised I looked like my dad. But you know, he's 99 now. He was always much older, and so it was really difficult to see a likeness. Anyway, so it started with that, and there are other elements of identity and control. There's a bit about my thesis, wanting to be a stone carver, blah 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 blah. And I realised that these themes, that identity and knowing who I am and what I am, is really at the core. Maybe it's everybody's core, but I've never been very clear on it as a person, and I suppose I seek that. Also, though, the control side of it is, I think I didn't feel like I had a lot of control as a younger person, and it's sort of taken me, I'm 52, it's taken me all that time to feel like I'm beginning to get a grip on it. I mean, what's that about? So this exhibition has kind of helped me to confidently, or creating it over the last sort of, I mean, it's been ongoing since 2021. So, you know, over the last few years, to say, no, this is who I am. I don't totally understand how I feel about, I mean, climate change is a really big thing for me in terms of that sense of being out of control. You know, and I'm married to someone who works within that sphere, and so knows everything that's going on, like, and he's prone to tell me about it, and I'm like, whoa, I cannot listen to that. I can't cope with that. I don't want to know. That sends me into a spiral of fear and everything. So we have an understanding about what. I don't mind knowing what the stuff is. I know there's loads of crap going on. I know it's really bad. I just want to know what the solutions are. So if you just give me a problem and no solutions, and there's nothing I can do about it, that is not good for my mental health at all. So anyway, so I'm sort of channeling some of that sense of sort of fear and anxiety, but also it's very much juxtaposed with the wonderful hope of the natural environment. And being in Pembrokeshire is a great asset to my work, shall we say, but it's just a wonderful place to be. It's so sort of natural, and you feel we're so lucky. On a daily basis you come across nature, to be part of nature. So that in itself, then there's another theme to the work outside of the sort of the identity, who I am in this out of control world we live in, and being human comes up a lot in this new work, and actually who are we as humans. And so I mentioned earlier about being an artist from a young age, but sort of getting pushed also, never being steered away from that. So before I wanted to be an artist, and from about the age, I think I was very young, I think I was probably 5, I wanted to be an archaeologist. I've always had a deep, deep, deep fascination with history, and especially prehistory. When I was 10, my school project was the evolution of man. I wouldn't use that title anymore. I'd be like the evolution of humans, or, you know, maybe we should have the evolution of women. But anyway, so I have this deep interest in prehistory. Who were we? As the same, we're supposed to be the same as the bodies we live in now. This meat suit that we're in, the way our brains work, is supposed to be the same, or that those humans first originated at least 300,000 years ago. That's what they say. So if we are physiologically the same, when did we last, that point we last lived in harmony with nature, I would say is around before farming. I think farming ruined everything. Everyone started getting greedy over land. Before that, we were hunter-gatherers. So just the beginning and just before the Neolithic, the Mesolithic period, you know, the Venus of Willendorf, 25,000 years ago, the person who made that, in theory, was the same as us. Who were, what is that? What is it to be human? What can we learn from our prehistoric ancestors who did live in harmony with nature, even though there were, you know, like hardly any of them compared to now? But what was the difference? What did they do? How happy were they? How did they live? Was this inevitable? Was this parasitic taking over of the globe inevitable? I'm quite fascinated by those questions and by the actual artifacts of prehistory.
We are progressively naturally towards our own end. Sorry to disappoint you.
Well, yeah. No, I think that's true.
I think we are using I'll use the term intelligence, but I'll change that to arrogance, to become the purveyors of our own demise.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's terribly. I don't even know if it is sad. It's just we are the tiny blip we are a tiny blip on the timeline of this planet.
Yes.
And we are, you know, nothing in the universe.
Yes, and we are also doing it in the creative arts now through AI. I'm so against AI with regards to taking people who write, you know, just putting something into a computer and out it comes with a sentence. Where's the creativity in that? Where's all that? And songwriters, and there'll be no humans working soon. It'll just be some guy tapping into a computer. I'm bitter.
That does sound very, very bleak.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think that.
And now some music.
I like to think that the thing that makes art really beautiful is humanity in it.
It's the humanity of it, yeah.
Art's about a human hand creating something.
There's got to be some
brain.
level of lived experience behind it, I think, to give it any sense of depth.
Yeah, there's art artificial.
Yeah.
What's the difference? I'm not sure, but you know, that's a whole other podcast.
Sorry, we're tangent. We're going on a tangent.
But there is an element of that, I suppose, in that question of who are we? And so for instance, in Wounded, you've got all these narrative pieces, quite complex imagery with loads of crazy colours and these figures, and there's some pure abstract expressionist pieces, and some are all mashed up, a little bit of landscape. But there's a couple, and only two, and I'd like to do more of these, what I call anchor points. Which are the two black and white compressed charcoal drawings. One is of the Venus of Willendorf, called When God Was a Woman, of course, and the other was the 3%, which is the Neanderthal skull, as a sort of not a warning, but a sense of what's the word I'm looking for? You know, there's destiny. Is that this was a really successful species, more successful than our own in us.
They were lovely, those two pictures. I love those two pictures.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Should we lighten the mood?
Let's do that.
Okay. We'll talk about you now.
Okay.
From someone who, as we've said, was not in the art world for many years, you now teach art.
I do.
Very successfully as well.
I think so.
Yeah. So how does teaching art influence your work, your approach to work? Does it have an impact?
I think it's had a very significant impact. I now think of it as an important part of my continuing, ongoing art practice, because it makes you stop, and sometimes it's really easy to get in anyway in the studio, and you know, you go down some kind of rabbit warren of ideas and get nowhere, and it just sort of makes you stop and just come out of yourself every now and then. But more importantly, it has made me articulate what it is that I actually do, and what is the practice of being an artist. What does that mean? And you know, a lot of people look at artists and think, oh, what a lovely life. No, they want you to do stuff for free. They don't want to pay for the hours and hours and hours of work that you've put into something. But art, that people don't appreciate, art is really hard work. It's harder than it's as hard as running any other business, should we say. You've got to really work to make it successful. And what the teaching does, it allows you to create sorts of income, which is really important to help support the creation of work. But most importantly, I will come to the point. I don't think I learned. Again, I was talking about colour and how I learned about colour from Instagram.
Yep.
In one way, I learnt to develop my colour skills. I really started to learn about colour through running colour workshops.
Okay.
Which sounds a bit, like, oh, why are you running a colour workshop if you didn't really know what you're doing? Nobody knows what they're doing. I don't know. If I knew what I was doing, I wouldn't do it. Genuinely. If I knew what a painting was going to look like, I wouldn't do it, because that's, for me, is pointless. I need to discover something in that painting, right? That's not trying to sound, pretentious. That's literally it. I can't do the same thing twice. I've tried it. People say, oh, can you do me one of those? I'm like, oh, God, this would be, I should try to take the money, do it. And it always ends in disaster. And then I let people down and just can't do it more than once. So, I know I don't always know what I go into a class, I'm teaching creativity. That's what I always say to people. In my experience, when you're when I'm in my teaching room, what people want is a great experience. There are certain things that are very specific. 1-day masterclass painting Tenby South Beach, very specific. That's all about the amount they're going to do in a day and pushing through all those barriers of I can't do it, or I can only paint like this. I push them right through really hard, right out of their comfort zones. Everyone goes away with a completed painting, doing things they never thought they'd be doing. Wonderful. And then there are other sort of softer things like the colour workshop. It's more of an abstract painting sort of class, but where we're literally looking at colours, how they sit together, and playing. Literally spend the day playing, covering ourselves in paint. So there is no definite outcome to things like that, and people like it.
So your work tackles important and challenging themes. What sort of led you into that arena?
That's a really good question. So, as you know, since starting to paint again, 2016, I went through a series of sort of landscape painting and, say, some abstract expressionist works in dreamscapes. And that was really for me to hone my skills. You can't come back from 20 years off and get straight back into it. I needed to sort of relearn some stuff, and to be honest, I ended up learning new stuff. And having done that, it's been great, and I've exhibited a few times. It's been great getting to understand living in Pembrokeshire during that time as well, and it sort of helped me to do that. But as I'm a thinking person, and you can't listen to the news or read the papers or whatever, or just do your own research without sort of knowing what kind of difficult challenges lay ahead for everyone through the environment and social injustices, inequalities, and there's so many things, such a big list. Anyway, so I'm just like, well, art should reflect society. It should reflect back on the difficult sort of questions of the day. I don't think I could justify just painting pretty pictures anymore. And so I feel like I've almost like shed that skin, if you see what I mean. Almost like, I'm not likening myself to a butterfly, but a bit like a chrysalis sort of coming out and becoming its final manifestation, because I want to try to say stuff, and I admit that a lot of my stuff is quite ambiguous and it's not necessarily really obvious what I'm talking about, but still I'm trying to create engaging works, and if it can engage on any level, then I'm having some impact and some effect, and I'm doing my best to do what I can do well to try to help in terms of, you know, raising awareness of, especially of the climate crisis and biodiversity loss. They're sort of top of my list.
The themes could be perceived as dark, but the colours certainly aren't.
No, and it's really important to me to create balance. So, in, you know, my world, I have my own inner issues and anxieties, and life is, you know, there's no light without dark, vice versa. And so a lot of what I'm trying to get over is about, if it's about inner turmoil, sorry, I'm going to say that again. It's about inner turmoil. A lot of that is all, you know, it's all energy inside, and it's you know, anxiety in some ways I would see as a sort of superpower, because it allows you to have deeper insight into things. It can generate more compassion in things, but also it's almost like being full of electricity sometimes. And so a lot of what I'm trying to do in the artworks is to get that inside feeling out, to create a visual manifestation of those feelings. And so a lot of the imagery is very, very colourful. I mean, I'm all about energy, colour and light, Mark. That's the three things. If you come to one of my classes, you're going to hear the words energy, colour and light till you're sick of it.
Okay.
Because that to me is what can create an interesting and dynamic image, which is the thing that gets somebody looking at it, which is the thing which engages on the issues you want them to. So colour is really, really important to me. And, you know, I do not want to paint just dark pictures.
No.
I want joy and celebration of the materials that I'm putting on this canvas. I love the pigments. You know, there is a real joy in being an artist, and I hope that comes across.
I think you're succeeding very well.
Thank you.
Final question, because we've been chatting for a while. Future plans?
I am going to spend the next year working through some new ideas, partly painting sort of series of smaller works that I can enter. I want to try and get out there and be involved in more group exhibitions and more shows around the country, sort of contribute, I suppose, to the sort of wider picture. But most of them actually only take small paintings, and most of mine are really large. So I'm just going to try to focus on a series of smaller works, say some new ideas or an extension of the existing ideas, but perhaps focusing more on the figurative.
Okay.
And seeing where that takes me, but quite experimental. May try and get that sketchbook really working hard, as opposed to having shopping lists written in it and things like that.
Great. It's been great talking to you. Wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
I will keep an eye on your career as it blossoms like that butterfly. And speak again. Thanks,
Anytime.
Louise.
Thank you.